The story begins with a little kid eating from his bowl, while his mother is standing at some distance, watching him with admiration. She goes to him and hands him a cup of milk. Suddenly, she starts to feel sick and has difficulty breathing. Everything around them is shaking. She tries to reach for the telephone, but her efforts are in vain. Out of nowhere, her facial features begin to change, and her whole face turns blue, with her eyes getting dark and empty. Her mouth drops open, expressing the horror she seems to be suffering from. Later on, a priest is giving a sermon in the church. After the sermon, Elsie approaches him to discuss her hallucinations. She is seeing spirits around her. Henrik, the priest, suggests seeking medical help, but she starts crying since she has already tried everything, and nothing is helping her at all. Henrik asks her when she last saw the spirits. She replies that she can see one right at this moment. The spirit is standing behind the priest, but Henrik can't see anything. He asks her if she knows who that spirit is, to which Elsie nods and tells him it is Henrik's mother. Suddenly, the flashes of the woman from the earlier scene appear. Elsie further tells him that his mother feels sad for him. He suggests she read psalms to treat her problem. She wonders which psalm she should recite. He tells her anything will work. Later, Priest Henrik arrives home, and Carolina, the babysitter, is waiting for him. She inquires about his meeting with Elsie. He hides his worries and replies it was good. She asks him if he dreamed about his mother in the kitchen again. He had been having this dream for 2 weeks. He further goes inside to meet his son Jasper. He questions him if he is okay, but the boy does not reply. Henrik is feeling awkward around his son. His own father was not a very fatherly figure to him, which in turn has made Henrik awkward when dealing with his own son. He goes silent for a while, and then tells his son that he has brought him a present, but Jasper does not respond. Later, his ex-wife arrives with her partner, and the boy gets all cheerful with them. Eventually, he leaves for his trip. Meanwhile, Carolina is having a serious conversation with someone on the phone. Henrik asks her who it is. She replies that it is from a forensic expert in Hammerdal, but Henrik seemed confused about why they are calling him. Carolina blurts out the sad news that Henrik's father has passed away. He feels depressed. Hearing about his father's death is a shock. He suddenly remembers his father taking him fishing. Henrik tries to stay calm and inquires with Carolina about his death, to which she replies that he drowned. Henrik does not take it well, and he gets furious. He wants to leave immediately, but Carolina does not let him. She is worried for him as it is dark, and his distress may pose a danger to him on the journey. Carolina wants to stay over because she is worried about Henrik, but Henrik wants her to leave. He remembers all of the memories with his father, especially the ones where his father would take him to the lakes. Like Henrik, his father was also a priest. At night, Henrik quietly watches his father's picture. He has mixed feelings for his dad and wants to see if he actually passed away due to drowning. The deep thoughts are too much to handle, and eventually, Henrik picks up the car keys and leaves. During his journey, he keeps listening to the radio. The road is pitch dark, and suddenly, the radio begins to malfunction, disorienting him. He tries to tune it in again and again, but to no avail. He is trying to fix it when, out of nowhere, he sees Elsie standing in the middle of the road. He immediately hits the brakes, but the speed is just too much to handle, and the car collides with her. The vehicle eventually stops at some distance. Henrik frantically gets out to check on her, but surprisingly, he finds no one. He clearly remembers seeing Elsie standing there, but now there is no one there. He looks around, discovering that he is in the woods. He can't find anyone outside. He goes back to the car and tries to start it, but it won't budge. He opens the hood, but everything seems fine. Henrik checks his phone, but he can't find a signal. A few minutes later, he comes across a signboard for a nearby town. He decides to walk on foot. Henrik finds a broken tree on his way and stares at it, starting to feel uneasy. He runs away in the other direction. After strolling for a few minutes, a house comes into view, and Henrik gladly paces toward it. He stands before the house, breathing heavily. There is a messy shed next to the house. Wooden logs and splinters are scattered everywhere. Henrik calls out to see if anyone is there, considering the lights are switched on. As he ventures toward the house, he feels someone's presence behind him. It turns out to be a girl. Cautiously, Henrik inquires about her parents, but she does not reply to any of his questions. He asks if anything has happened and introduces himself. Suddenly, the girl's face turns blue, and her eyes vanish. Henrik becomes anxious and retreats from the girl. She vanishes in a split second, and at the same moment, Henrik hears someone yell from the inside. The man asks about his identity and loads up his rifle to shoot. Henrik introduces himself as a priest and tells the man about his father, who used to be the priest in the nearby town. He tells the man he is seeking refuge. The house owner, Ivar, thinks for a few minutes and ultimately lets him stay. He asks Henrik to head over to his son Ollie's room. The wife asks Henrik what he was doing in the barn, but he is unable to provide an explanation. He asks if they had any more children, to which Ivar refutes. Desperate to get some information, Henrik inquires if they know any forensic experts, but the family leaves without saying anything else. Henrik is left alone in the room and eventually lies down to sleep. Suddenly, a figure creeps behind him and eerily whispers for help into his ear. Henrik gets off the bed terrified and stands beside the door. Her words are still echoing through his head. He sits on the bed and looks at the barn from the window. Henrik goes to the lake near the forest and finds someone drowning there. When he tries to grab the person, he finds a telephone receiver instead. All of a sudden, a corpse emerges from the water, and Henrik wakes up from his dream. He creates a crucifix with water on the wall and gets dressed. He is still looking at the clothes in the closet when Ollie arrives. He speaks highly about Gabriel, Henrik's father, and tells him how he would recite Psalm 21 in the church. He wonders if Henrik knows about it. Henrik asks Ollie if his father's demise was an accident, but Ollie claims it to be an assassination, which leaves Henrik a bit more nervous. Ollie does not stop and further tells him that his corpse was found near the lake. Ever since his demise, the light in the barn always remains switched on. Henrik gets angry and inquires about the assassin. Ollie says that only time will reveal the culprit now. Ollie also states that he was not allowed to attend his funeral. Henrik wonders if his father was already buried, to which Ollie agrees as everyone seemed in a hurry to bury him. This leaves Henrik in silence, and Ollie leaves the room. Suddenly, the phone rings. It's from Carolina. She has a piece of bad news about Elsie. Elsie had passed away the previous evening. He asks what time Elsie passed away. She answers that it was somewhere before midnight. Henrik immediately remembers hitting Elsie. Carolina informs him that when she went to her house in the morning, she didn't respond. She opened the door with a spare key she had. Inside, she found Elsie, deceased in the bathroom with pill bottles scattered all around the floor. What Carolina says next is beyond terrifying. The sentence, "Henrik must burn in hell," was written in blood on the wall. Henrik immediately drops to the floor, and his face is left in a horror-struck expression. It is almost as if he has seen something horrendous. Rendered speechless, he leaves the room. He goes downstairs and hears Ivar talking to someone. Henrik stops to eavesdrop. He peeks inside and finds him brushing someone's white hair. But before Henrik can see anything more, Ivar comes outside. Ivar wants to fix Henrik's car so he can leave. Henrik keeps asking about a forensic examination of his father's body, but Ivar ignores the request and takes him to fix the car. Outside, Ivar attempts to start Henrik's car, but it does not budge. The car is effectively useless. Meanwhile, Henrik decides to go to the cemetery to his father's grave. He finds a woman standing before a grave, but leaves before Henrik can talk. Henrik checks the grave. It belongs to a woman named Alva. He starts to follow the woman and peeks inside the house she has entered. Before he can leave, she calls him out. Henrik introduces himself and asks if she was related to Gabriel. She informs him that Gabriel used to frighten the entire village with the fear of God and warned them about the judgment day. Henrik inquires if she believes that his father was assassinated, but she has nothing to say about it. Later, when he returns home, he finds Nora sleeping in the shed. He goes to her, and in a turn of events, they both get intimate. Suddenly, he finds her mother lying beside him, with an evil grin on her face. Henrik moves back in terror and runs away from the shed. In a twisted turn of events, the mother asks him to stop running and turn back. Henrik cannot understand what to do, when suddenly she comes forward. To his horror, her whole face is covered in blood, with no eyes in the sockets. He screams and runs away from her. He goes back inside the house. When he reaches his room, he looks outside, but finds nobody. Henrik keeps hearing sounds behind him, as if somebody is following him. Turns out, it is just Ollie. He asks what he was doing in the barn. A nervous Henrik says that he has done nothing. Ollie gets angry and starts reciting the verses from the psalm. He tells Henrik that he should take charge of the responsibility God has given him. The following day, Henrik goes to the cemetery again. He enters the church beside it and goes to his father's room. There, he finds a book on the table. He starts to go through it and finds several pictures and writings. Henrik comes across Psalm 21 and starts reading it. As he is reading, his mother's ghost suddenly emerges from behind him and cryptically asks why he did this. Henrik, with lightning speed, moves from his chair terrified. The voice keeps echoing in his ears. He is about to leave the church when suddenly he feels someone moving behind him. When he turned around, he finds no one. But when he moves back, someone is standing before him. He runs out with a book in his hand and keeps running from the cemetery until he finds the old woman he had met earlier beside a grave. It turns out she was also a spirit. He reaches the forest and finds his mother's spirit there. She attacks him, all the while asking why he had left. Suddenly, he is surrounded by ghosts of his mother and Elsie. Henrik kneels in desperation and screams that he believed them. He believes that hell exists. As he lets out these words, the ghosts disappear, and Nora, Ollie, and her mother stand before him. Ollie is looking at him with surprise. In the same instant, Ivar comes running from inside the shed and strikes Henrik in his face. Ollie is worried that something has started and warns Henrik that they would take his life like they did with his father. The crazed boy claims that the head of the forensic team assassinated his father and then covered it up. He is on the hunting team, and he will also come after him. Ollie warns him that the lights in the barn will be on the following night too, and then runs away. Ivar and Henrik exchange petrified glances. Henrik flees from the eerie encounter. Later, he is lying on the bed, his mind swimming in the same memory of finding the corpse and the phone receiver in the lake. Ollie is sitting beside him, reassuring him that Henrik is not weak and won't become a laughingstock. Henrik blurts out that he will report the person who assassinated his father, but Ollie tries to explain that none of this will matter. Ollie encourages him that he has to avenge his father's demise. Henrik feels tired. Ollie asks him to take some rest, and then they'd fight together. Ivar is having dinner downstairs with his wife and Nora. Ollie joins them after a few minutes. Suddenly, the light in the barn turns on its own. Ivar wonders who has done that. He keeps asking Ollie about the light. At that moment, the door opens, and there stands Gabriel's ghost, holding an axe in his hand. He walks to them. Ivar and his wife are shocked, and they step away from their chairs petrified. Turns out, it's just their imagination. It is just Henrik. Ollie exclaims that he will read the psalm to his father. Ivar gets scared and claims that he will call the forensic expert, but Ollie gets angry that it is too late. Henrik has been asking him since the beginning, but he has been ignoring his messages. Ollie says that now Ivar gets his punishment for supporting evil. He starts reciting the psalm. They all start to cry as Ollie asks Henrik to end Ivar. But before he can do so, his wife confesses that they have been cheating behind Ivar's back. All the wrongdoing started even before the marriage and continued after it. The little girl Henrik had seen in the barn was the younger self of Ivar's wife Ajnak. Ollie could not believe it as he used to look up to Gabriel. He keeps asking Henrik to hit, but he does not budge. Ajnak confesses that Gabriel was Ollie's father, not Ivar. Ollie runs toward Ivar to end his life, but before he can do so, Nora shouts that it was her fault. She reveals that her mother had been cutting her hair in the barn when Gabriel arrived. He tried to touch Nora inappropriately, and her mother got angry. As soon as he turned around, her mother attacked and ended Gabriel. She kept stabbing him until he was deceased. Ivar joined her once his wife had brutalized Gabriel. He dragged the corpse away and threw it into the lake. The forensic expert also helped them in altering the report. Amidst this revelation, Ollie runs out of the house. Ivar follows him while Henrik stays behind, standing silently against the door. He then enters back inside the house and finds his father's ghost sitting on the dining chair. Henrik gets confused and claims in a broken tone that he had never said anything. Gabriel tells Henrik that he was not supposed to tell his mother anything. It was their little secret that Henrik was supposed to keep. Henrik still claims that he never told her, but Gabriel asks him to confess, as nobody else would have done that. Henrik remembers from his childhood that his father used to touch him inappropriately, and one day, his mom found out. She caught Gabriel in the act and kicked him out of the house. Henrik feels threatened and scared by the ghost of his father and drops down on the floor. Suddenly, the ghost stands over him and showers a black substance on Henrik. Ollie is sitting in the woods when Ivar comes and joins him. He rests his head on his father's shoulders and starts crying uncontrollably. Ollie has always looked up to Gabriel, and it is a shock for him when those dark truths come out about him. Before leaving, Henrik meets everyone, and Ajnak hands him the psalm. He is heading back to his town when, in the middle of the road, his car breaks down and won't start. What a surprise. Suddenly, he sees his mother and Elsie approaching him. He begins to panic and tries to restart the car immediately, but it won't budge. Eventually, he stops trying and rests his head against the steering wheel. But after a while, when nothing happens, he pulls up his head and realizes that there is nobody around him. Before driving, he catches a glimpse of his mother in the rear view. He picks up the psalm and runs away, but she stops him on the road. He hands her the psalm, and she takes it. The book begins to burn, and so does her other body. Suddenly, she appears in her human form, before finally turning into ashes. Behind him stands Elsie, watching him with a smile before she vanishes away. In the end, Henrik sermonizes in the church, but suddenly gets angry and speaks about punishment and hell. He claims that the church only tells about the punishment of hell, when the only thing they need is the language of love and peace. People get angry at him, and they throw him out of the church. He takes Carolina and his son and leaves the church immediately. Henrik moves away from the town to start a new life.